What is going on, New York Giant fans? Welcome back to another video. If you guys haven't already, hit that like button, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops to your jobs. Appreciate y'all coming back. Couple updates before I go into the video, what it's about and stuff like that. I may or may not have a podcast episode out on Tuesday because I'm doing these head coaching profiles, and maybe I'll substitute the head coaching profiles for the podcast episode because unless a head coach gets hired on Tuesday, then it's basically being covered in videos what I would want to do on a podcast. And I think videos are just more cut and clear because of attention span, and also because of, well, you get to hear more about the candidates and the research that I have done compared to in a podcast episode. You kind of have to crunch it because you don't want to make it 2 hours or 1.5 hours. You kind of want to cut it down between the 40-minute mark and the 60-minute mark. So there's that. Boys in the Big Apple, 8:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will have Snacks of Bleeding Blue on. Met him in person twice. Very funny guy. He's going to bring that to the table for the first couple of minutes of the episode. Then he has an obligation, but obviously I thank him so very much for coming on. We're going to try to get some more guests these next couple of weeks, try to make it interesting, try to start off on the right foot with you guys. And then Twin Bill. That is obviously Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the NYY News TV channel. If you guys haven't already, follow their Twitter as they have announced. And if you haven't heard, I'll tell you guys myself. Ozzie Guillen, former White Sox World Series winning manager, is actually joining the NYY News TV team with his sons, and they're doing a podcast together called Guillen's World. So that is going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully in one of these live streams, I'll be able to meet Ozzie Guillen and his kids. It will be a fun endeavor, an interesting endeavor, and I'm just so happy to be a part of the team. So let's go into this. Obviously, I said before I wanted to do some head coaching videos in terms of candidates. Brian Flores, we're talking about him today. Now, I'm going to outline a couple of things that's probably going to be for this video and a couple other videos as well. I'm not going to go too much into scheme. I'm not going into watching film or much of quotes. I'll go off of statistics, some analytics, background. Also, to note, I'll go into what fans have said about that certain candidate, because I was in contact with a Dolphins content creator. Shout outs to him, Bobby Melendez, I believe his name is. If I'm going to check that real quickly, Bobby Melendez, yes, is his name. And I was chatting with him about Chris Grier, the general manager of the Miami Dolphins, and I was chatting with him about Brian Flores and just getting a fan's perspective. So let's talk about Brian Flores. Let's go into the background, all that other stuff. Hopefully this is a good video for you guys. Hopefully you guys learn some stuff about Brian Flores, some of the stuff back in his days as the defensive coordinator, really 1 year with New England before moving on to the Miami Dolphins, stuff like that. And if I'm not doing something right, or if I'm missing something, please include it in the comments. I want to hear your guys' constructive criticism. So with that being said, Brian Flores is actually a native of New York. He was born in Brooklyn. I believe he went to Poly Prep High School, the same high school that Isaiah Wilson went to, that is in Dyker Heights, Brooklyn. It's about 15 minutes away from me, probably. And I think he lived in Sunset Park or Park Slope, one of the two. With that being said, I'll go into his career. He actually crossed paths with one of the New York Giants general manager candidates by the name of Adam Peters, because both were in New England, I believe, at a certain period of time. With that being said, he started out as a special teams assistant in 2008 with the New England Patriots, carried that duty until 2010 when he actually switched a little bit over to the offensive side of the ball, was the assistant offense and special teams coach. It's a kind of a weird title to have. He held that position in 2010, then in 2011, he moved to defensive assistant, and that's really where his niche was made. So he held that for a year, was the safeties coach, and I apologize, I actually didn't even go into his time as an executive. I'll do that afterwards. He was the safeties coach from 2012 to 2015. Then in 2016, he picked up the linebackers coach title, held that till 2018. 2018, he actually was not given the title of defensive coordinator, but was the play caller for the entire season. Won the Super Bowl with the New England Patriots, and then 2019 to 2021 was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Talking about his time as an executive, 2004 to 2005, he was a scouting assistant with the New England Patriots, then moved to pro scout between 2006 and 2007. 2008 became a special teams assistant. So real quickly, I just want to look up his record as a head coach before I go into his 1 year as defensive coordinator in New England. So he has a 24-25 record. Obviously, the first season, second season, third season all always combines that. But with that being said, let's go to his time in New England. As I said, I'm not going to talk too much about scheme. But with that being said, New England did run a 4-3 while Flores was there. I think they still run a 4-3. Then when he went to Miami, I believe they actually switched to a 3-4 system. Patrick Graham was with him in his first year in Miami, and there's a lot of stuff there. But anyway, with that being said, in terms of statistics, analytics on the defensive side of the ball, let's talk about the 2018 New England defense. Now, obviously you think automatically, hey, the defense must be good, right? Look at the Super Bowl. They shut out the Rams 13-3. They were middle in the pack in some categories, and it's all over the place, at least in my opinion. But with that being said, they were 21st in total yards per game. They were 23rd in passing defense, 11th against the run, 7th in points per game, 4th in interceptions, 30th in sacks. That was actually tied with the New York Giants, and their leading sacker, which I'll include right now, was Trey Flowers, and he was let go I would say after the season, not like released, but they did not sign him to another contract, actually went to the Detroit Lions and is still there to this day. He had 36 pressures, 7.5 sacks, 57 tackles, and a couple other stats if you want to look on Pro Football Reference. But with that being said, 8th in blitz percentage. So obviously you could kind of figure out, okay, well, they didn't necessarily have the best pass rushing group, but they tried getting to the quarterback, and they were 24th in pressure percentage. So even if you blitz the most in the league, it doesn't mean you're going to get the production there because of the talent on your team or the coaching, whatever the case may be. So they were 24th in pressure percentage. They were last in missed tackles, which is a very disciplined defense. You don't want to be first in missed tackles. You want to be the first most, second most, third most. You want to be the last. So very disciplined defense. I would not expect anything else while Bill Belichick is the head coach of that team. They were 5th in turnover differential, and they were 7th in turnovers. Their leading interceptor was Duron Harmon. Surprisingly, not Stephon Gilmore, but he was the lead man in forcing turnovers, including forced fumbles, stuff like that. But Duron Harmon, I'm just going to present some stats in coverage. Duron Harmon had 4 interceptions on the season, gave up 11 completions on 18 targets, about a completion percentage of 61.1, gave up 198 yards, 1 touchdown, a 77.8 passer rating, which isn't bad. Played all 16 games, started 6 of them. Then you have Stephon Gilmore, who had 2 interceptions, a couple of forced fumbles. I believe he had 3 forced fumbles. He, in coverage, gave up 46 completions on 95 targets, 48.4 completion percentage. He probably had the best year of his career the following year once Flores left. I'm not saying that has anything to do with Brian Flores, but he gave up 519 yards, 5 touchdowns, and a 73.9 passer rating, which, once again, really not that bad. So that was his tenure in New England. During his time there, he did win 4 Super Bowls, one of them being the year he was the defensive play caller, defensive coordinator, however you want to call it. So, let's move on to his time in Miami. I'm actually going to pull up his coaching staffs, or at least for the first year, what his staffs look like. And through this, not just stats, not just player stats, stuff like that. I'm actually going to go over the coaching changes, some of the transactions that the team made, because it does involve the head coach somewhat, right? So here is his offensive staff that he did build, including the assistant head coach who stepped down on July 13th, 2019. That was Jim Caldwell. But offensive coordinator Chad O'Shea, assistant quarterbacks coach Jerry Shaplinski, probably became the quarterbacks coach once Caldwell left, but Shaplinski, we obviously know him because he was our quarterbacks coach for 2 seasons. Running backs, Eric Studesville was a candidate to become the New York Giants head coach in 2018, didn't get the job. I believe he was the Broncos running backs coach at some point, if I'm not mistaken. Carl Dorrell as a wide receivers coach. George Godsey, the tight ends coach. Pat Flaherty was the original offensive line coach, but they fired him on July 29th because Flores apparently said that he did not do a good job of implementing the scheme. Offensive line coach after that was Dave DeGuelmo. We all know him. We all know Pat Flaherty too, but Dave DeGuelmo in specifics because he took over after Mark Colombo was fired during that bye-week drama-filled session after the Eagle game and before the Bengal game, but DeGuelmo took over, and the offensive line got better with Joe Judge's help. That's one of the things I will give Joe Judge credit for, is the improvement, a little bit of the offensive line. Really didn't carry over into the next season unless you're talking about players in specifics like Andrew Thomas. So that was his offensive coaching staff, and just a little prequel. He really couldn't keep a lot of consistency with the offensive coaching staffs. Probably one of the reasons he was let go from Miami, but we'll talk about that probably at the end. Let's look at his defensive coaching staff. Patrick Graham, we all know him, defensive coordinator of the New York Giants the past 2 years. He took the job with the New York Giants because of Joe Judge, and he was promoted to assistant head coach. Then you got Marion Hobby as the defensive line coach. Rob Leonard, who actually left the New York Giants. 2018 was his last year with the Giants. I think he was actually the linebackers coach, or he was the defensive backs coach, or one of the assistants. But I'm pretty sure he was the linebackers coach. Went to Miami. I think he's still there. If he's not there, then shucks. Oh well. Defensive pass game coordinator and cornerbacks coach Josh Boyer. I want to know actually if he's related to Brant Boyer, the Jets special teams coach, or former Jets special teams coach. I'm not really a Jets fan. I don't keep track of that. Then safeties coach Tony Oden, special teams coach Danny Crossman, who is still there, and then assistant special teams coach Brandon Farrell. So there's that. I'm going to take a quick sip of water so you guys can absorb that, and then we'll go over transactions, the record, who they drafted, stuff like that, because there is a lot to go over with the 2019 Miami Dolphins. Okay, I am ready. Quick sip, obviously. So, if I could get it in here, some of the transactions and some of the rookies, they weren't big in free agency. This is, or I should say was, a rebuilding team. They fired Gase. Jets picked them up. But the purpose of this whole process and hiring Brian Flores was to give him a few years and was to let him rebuild the team with Chris Grier as the general manager. So it wasn't, oh, well, we're going to sign this guy in free agency. No, they actually got rid of a couple of guys and obviously traded guys for draft picks, whatever the case may be. We'll try to go as much in chronological order, but they did draft Christian Wilkins. They also drafted Michael Dieter, Andrew Van Ginkel. I'm going to pull up the 2019 draft class real quickly so I could go over all the picks, but the most impactful of the 19 draft class arguably were those three guys. There was also Isaiah Prince, Chandler Cox, the fullback, and Myles Gaskin, the running back out of Washington. So let's get to the schedule, or we could just interchangeably, do all the things, right? With that being said, let's actually, take a look at their schedule for 2019, and they had a really bad start. They started off 0-7, and as you can see on the schedule, they only really had 2 close games. Now, that Pittsburgh game actually was close at the time, but Pittsburgh came back, their defense held up, and the offense just started moving down the field. I remember one specific play, and I don't know specifically when Patrick Graham's play calling duties were taken away, by Brian Flores, but there was a blitz on a 3rd and 16 that led to a James Washington touchdown. It was Deontay Johnson. With that being said, not a great play call. With that being said, however, they gave up over 100 points within the first 2 weeks, and there were rumors flying from everywhere. Everybody is requesting a trade, this, that, and the other thing. Then they lost 43-0 to New England. And they really didn't stay consistent with starting quarterbacks. Obviously, they traded for Josh Rosen. They signed Ryan Fitzpatrick, a couple other things as well, but they started settling with Fitzpatrick after the bye week, and he would become the starter for the remainder of the season. But with that being said, obviously the first couple of weeks were pretty much hell for them. So let's talk about some stats. Let's also talk about some transactions. Now, in, I would say, a period before the trade deadline, you could also include the trade deadline, they traded Minkah Fitzpatrick to Pittsburgh for a first-round pick and a couple other picks as well, but obviously Minkah Fitzpatrick has been very meaningful to that defense. Kenyon Drake was traded to Arizona, spent another year there, then went to Las Vegas this past year and suffered a season-ending injury, which obviously the NFL, I think, currently is reviewing to try to have some sort of rule so whatever he experienced really doesn't happen to any other players. But with that being said, let's take a look at the offense and the defense, because the offense we're taking a look because, well, he's the head coach. Offensively, they were 27th in total yards per game. They were 12th in passing offense, 32nd in rushing offense. They were 25th in points per game. They were first in sacks allowed. They allowed the most sacks in the league, 58. They were 25th in giveaways. I should say takeaways. I apologize. Giveaways, actually. So 25th in giveaways. I apologize for mixing that up. Second in pass play percentage, 4th in pass play percentage on first down, 31st in run rate percentage, 32nd in run rate percentage on first down. So they were a heavy passing team, but as you can probably look at their stats, which I will read to you guys, they were not successful whenever they ran the football because of the offensive line. So Fitzpatrick in 2019 threw 20 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, was sacked 40 times. He threw for about 3,529 yards, a completion percentage of 62. So that's not totally bad for Ryan Fitzpatrick standards. In 6 games played, Josh Rosen had a completion percentage of 53.2, 567 yards, 1 touchdown, and 5 interceptions. So we all know the Josh Rosen story. You take a look at the rushing game, and it's pretty sad, but obviously first year of the rebuild. Ryan Fitzpatrick was their leading rusher. He had 4 touchdowns on the ground, 16.2 yards per game, about 4.5 yards per carry. Now, this is not designed runs. I'm pretty sure a lot of them had to be escaping from the pocket from that bad offensive line. Their second leading rusher was Mark Walton, and I'm pretty sure he's not with them anymore. One of the Dolphins running backs, and I think it was Walton, got in trouble with the law, and I have not heard his name since. He did not have any touchdowns that year, 3.8 yards per carry, and just basically whichever running back they went to, Patrick Laird, Kenyon Drake, Kalen Ballage, Myles Gaskin, they really didn't have much success on the ground. You take a look at their passing game, though. As I mentioned, they were 12th in passing offense, but once again, they were 5-11 to end the season, so it's not like, oh, well, this made a dramatic impact because the defense was very bad until the bitter end. Devontae Parker actually got a 1,000-yard season, 9 touchdowns. Then Mike Gesicki, who at the time was the second-year man out of Penn State, had 5 touchdowns, 570 receiving yards, about 35.6 yards per game. Preston Williams was behind him, 3 touchdowns. Alan Hearns, 2 touchdowns. Albert Wilson factored in, Isaiah Ford, Patrick Laird, and a couple other guys as well. You take a look at the defensive side of the ball, and we all know, yes, Brian Flores is very defensive-minded. Total yards per game, 30th. They were 26th against the pass, 27th against the run. Points, in terms of a scoring defense, they were 32nd. That's really bad. And I'm not putting it lightly, folks. 27th in turnover differential, and that's not just, oh, well, the defense isn't creating turnovers. It's offensive, too, because of how many interceptions and fumbles are happening. That impacts the turnover differential, of course. 29th in turnovers, so defense really didn't create a lot of turnovers. 11th in blitz percentage. Brian Flores, Patrick Graham, I mentioned before that the Patriots defense in 2018, that they were aggressive in terms of blitzing, at least analytically 10th, I believe, in blitz percentage, but they really didn't get to the quarterback. And Patrick Graham's defense was 32nd in pressure percentage, so he really wanted to be aggressive. And with that being said, they did not have the talent. They did not simply have the talent in the defensive backfield. They didn't have the talent up front to get to the passer, and that's why they were 32nd in pressure percentage. They were 12th most in missed tackles, so young players, very undisciplined. 32nd in sacks, not good. As I mentioned, 32nd in pressure percentage, so they could not get to the quarterback, and 13th in interceptions, so that is a positive. With that being said, let's go to the lead sacker, leader in interceptions. That's a three-way tie right there. And we'll talk about free agents, even though they don't have any. We'll talk about draft pick progressions through their first season. The most impactful, I picked out 3. And I believe those 3 are still with the team. Probably the most impactful to this day out of the 2019 draft class, in my opinion. If not, I apologize. So Taco Charlton, the former Dallas Cowboy, was their lead sacker. Only 10 pressures, but 5 sacks in total, and a total of 5 games started. He appeared in 10 games. Then you take a look at the three-way tie for the leader in interceptions. This is a name that Giants fans should remember from this past year. Stephen Parker was one of them. 2 interceptions. Didn't do bad in coverage. Gave up 7 completions on 13 targets, 53.8 completion percentage, 107 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an 81.2 passer rating. Started 4 games, appeared in 14 games, 20 tackles on the season. Then you move to Bobby McCain, who almost was a lifer for them. Then this past year, he was in Washington, played for a couple other teams as well. But in 2019, he had 2 interceptions, three-way tie, obviously. Gave up a 66.7 completion percentage in coverage, 12 completions on 18 targets. Gave up 3 touchdowns, a 94 passer rating. Started 8 games, appeared in 9. Then you move to a guy that I've been impressed with for the last couple of years on the Dolphins in terms of the secondary. And I know the Giants actually have a good secondary, at least at this moment they do. But he's a guy that I wanted in 2019 as an undrafted free agent, Nick Needham. He actually picked off Eli Manning on a Hail Mary. But with that being said, he fielded 2 interceptions. He gave up 43 completions on 74 targets. Started 11 games, appeared in 12, 58.1 completion percentage, 646 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 111.7 passer rating. Not very good. Not very good. Then you look at the free agents draft pick progressions. Obviously, no free agents to talk about. But you do have 3 rookies that I did pick out that I feel like maybe were the most impactful. Christian Wilkins, 3 tackles for loss, 4 quarterback hits, total of 2 sacks, 12 pressures, and that's pretty much his stats, total of 56 tackles. So at the time, people were probably debating, and could you possibly compare it to the Dexter Lawrence pick? Yes, both of them were out of Clemson, but both first-round picks, both good picks, but not totally impactful like you would want. I don't know how Dolphins feel about Wilkins. I don't know. I forgot to put Dolphins fans in there, but at the same time, I don't know how Dolphins fans feel about Wilkins to this day. I know how I feel about Dexter Lawrence to this day. Good pick, but not a first-round talent in my opinion, but I'm going to stop there. Michael Dieter had allowed 6 sacks in 16 games. Once again, that offensive line really wasn't good. 3rd-round pick out of Wisconsin. Then Andrew Van Ginkel, 5th-round pick out of Wisconsin. And he had a total of 15 tackles on the season. Probably spent most of his time on special teams. 1 sack, 4 quarterback hits, 4 tackles for a loss, 1 fumble recovery. No interceptions, 1 game started, and appeared in 6 games overall. So there's that. That is the 2019 and 19 season. They went 5-11, and I'll just go upon some coaching firings, and then when I go into 2020, we'll talk about some of the coaches that departed for different jobs, and we'll talk about coaches that were hired because they did hire a few assistants. So they fired Chad O'Shea, the offensive coordinator. They fired Dave DeGuelmo, who later would become the Giants' offensive line coach later in the 2020 season. They also fired Tony Oden, the safeties coach, at the end of the season. So let's move into 2020. All right, so now we're in 2020. The Miami Dolphins finished with a record. Let me just pull it up real quick so I know what I'm talking about. They finished with a 10-6 record. With that being said, they did not make the playoffs, and I feel like their success was somewhat premature. They did spend a little bit in free agency. We'll talk about that. Just want to pull up their schedule real quickly. As you can see, they went 10-6, and they split with the New England Patriots. In terms of the Buffalo Bills, they lost the first time. The second time around, they did lose again, which eliminated them from the playoffs, and they beat the New York Jets both times, which wasn't hard with Adam Gase as their head coach. With that being said, let's talk about the things we talked about from the 2019 season, but 2020. So, coaching changes. One thing I was going to bring up, Patrick Graham left Miami to become the defensive coordinator and the assistant head coach of the New York Giants. Jerry Shaplinski tagged along with him, went to the New York Giants as the quarterback's coach. Carl Dorrell, the wide receivers coach from the previous year, went to Colorado, accepted the job as the head coach. Then you bring up a lot of promotions, a lot of assistants, stuff like that. Robbie Brown was hired as Shaplinski's replacement as the quarterback's coach. Josh Boyer was promoted to defensive coordinator. Rob Leonard was promoted to assistant defensive line coach. Chan Gailey was hired as the offensive coordinator. Steve Marshall and Lemuel Jean-Pierre were hired as the offensive line coaches. Colby Smith was hired as the offensive quality control coach. Josh Grizzard was hired as the wide receivers coach. Gerald Alexander and Kurt Kuntz were hired as the defensive back coaches. Anthony Campanile was hired as the inside linebackers coach, and Austin Clark was hired as the outside linebackers coach. So I'm not going to go into contract specifics because you guys can probably imagine. With that being said, they did spend a lot in free agency. They had cap space because they got rid of Drake. They got rid of Fitzpatrick. They got rid of a couple other guys. With that being said, they signed Kyle Van Noy, Byron Jones, Jordan Howard, Kayvon Frazier, Emmanuel Agba, Ted Karras. Those are some names to throw right off the bat. So, let's get into the draft, actually. Why not? Before we go into stats. So, they drafted Tua Tagovailoa with the 5th overall pick. They also drafted 2 more picks within the first round. Austin Jackson, offensive tackle out of USC. And then Noah Ibenogany, if I'm saying that correctly. Hopefully I'm not butchering it. But they selected him with the 30th overall pick. Then, second round, they selected Robert Hunt out of Louisiana. Fun fact, former Giants offensive line coach coached him at Louisiana. Raekwon Davis out of Alabama with the 56th pick. Then Brandon Jones, free safety out of Texas in the 3rd round. In the 4th round, they selected Solomon Kidley, guard out of Georgia, played with Andrew Thomas and Isaiah Wilson and some of the other guys on that offensive line. In the 5th round, they selected Jason Strawbridge out of North Carolina and Curtis Weaver out of Boise State. They also took long snapper Blake Ferguson in the 6th round and Malcolm Perry in the 7th round, wide receiver out of Navy. Some other signings you could probably reflect on. They signed Eric Flowers. I forgot to even add that. They signed him to a $10 million per year contract, 3 years, $30 million. Landon Roberts, former New England Patriots linebacker, 1 year, $2 million. They signed Clayton Fidelum, former Cincinnati Bengals safety. Shaq Lawson, 3 years, $30 million. That did not work out. Just a prequel. Kamir Grugier-Hill, 1 year, $3 million from the Eagles, linebacker, and Kayvon Frazier I obviously talked about. So let's get into the stats and stuff like that. So let me just scroll to the correct spot. Offensively, they were middle of the pack, not really that great. They were 22nd in total yards per game, 20th in passing offense, 22nd in rushing offense, 15th in points per game, 16th in sacks allowed. So a big upgrade over what they had in 2019, where they gave up the most sacks. They were right in the middle. 16th in giveaways, that's middle of the pack. 19th in pass play percentage, 16th in pass play percentage on first down, 14th in run rate percentage, 28th in run rate percentage on first down. You take a look at the defensive side of the ball. Middle of the pack, but a lot of high tier stats, top 10 stats. And you wouldn't expect that coming off of a 5-11 season where the defense was atrocious until the last few games. And they did make progress. I forgot to add, they did make progress at the end of the season. And that's something you saw with Joe Judge in his first year, where the defense was making progress throughout the season. The offense was getting going on the running side of things. So there's that to remark. With that being said, 20th in total yards per game, 23rd in passing defense, 16th in rushing defense, 6th in points per game, 3rd in turnover differential. Obviously, that has to deal with quarterback play also, turning over the football, interceptions, fumbles, stuff like that. 1st in turnovers, 2nd in blitz percentage, with Josh Boyer, if I'm saying that correctly, if I'm referencing the name correctly, taking over as a defensive coordinator. They were not scared to blitz, 22nd in blitz percentage, and they got there more than they did in 2019. 11th in pressure percentage, 19th in missed tackles, that's not too bad. 11th in sacks, and 1st in interceptions. So their leading sacker was Emmanuel Ogbah. I'll go back to the offensive stats in a moment, but he totaled 9 sacks, 36 pressures, 42 total tackles, played in 16 games, and started 12 of them. With that being said, you go to the leader in picks. Who else would it be? Xavier Howard. Not Byron Jones, surprisingly, but Xavier Howard. Was targeted a lot, 101 times, gave up 52 completions, about a 51.5 completion percentage, 10 interceptions, 719 yards, given up 4 touchdowns, and a 48.3 passer rating. And we'll go to the offensive stats in a minute. I just want to mention the Pro Bowlers as well. Xavier Howard was a Pro Bowler, but the All-Pros, Jason Sanders, Xavier Howard, and Jakeem Grant, probably for his duties on special teams. Take a look at the offensive side of the ball. Ryan Fitzpatrick completed 68.5% of his passes for 2,091 yards, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. You take a look at Tua Tagovailoa, which I was actually going to bring up in the rookie section. I'll go over him anyway. Completed 64.1% of his passes, total of 11 touchdowns, 5 interceptions for 1,814 yards. You take a look at the rushing category, which was slightly better than the previous year. Myles Gaskin was the leading rusher, 3 total touchdowns, 584 yards on 142 carries, 4.1 yards per carry. Salvon Ahmed, 75 rushes, 319 yards, total of 3 touchdowns himself, 4.3 yards per carry. DeAndre Washington and a couple other guys as backups as well. Devontae Parker did not have an 1,000-yard season. He had 793 yards, 4 touchdowns, about 12.6 yards per catch. Mike Gesicki was the second leading receiver again, 703 yards, 6 touchdowns, total of 53 receptions. Myles Gaskin was the third leading receiver, 2 touchdowns, 388 yards. If I'm seeing that correctly, Jakeem Grant, Preston Williams, Isaiah Ford, Lynn Bowden, Durham Smythe, and Adam Sheen behind them. So we take a look at the impact of the free agents and the impact of the draft picks as well. Let's go to Byron Jones, and a lot of people deemed it as somewhat of a disappointment, an off year for Byron Jones, because they were expecting a lockdown corner, and he really acted as if he was the second cornerback and you compare that to James Bradbury. James Bradbury had a better season. He was elected to a Pro Bowl, and I understand that Pro Bowl voting, yes, that's done by the fans, but James Bradbury overall did have a better season. So Byron Jones had 2 interceptions, gave up 44 completions on 73 targets, 775 yards with a passer rating of 108, and gave up 5 touchdowns. So not too great. Couple good stats, couple of bad stats, 37 total tackles. Then you take a look at the draft class and some of the higher impacts. Austin Jackson, which I felt honestly was a reach. 4 sacks, 38 pressures in 13 games. Solomon Kindley, 4 sacks, 17 pressures, 13 games played. Eric Flowers, 6 sacks allowed, only 12 pressures. So obviously, minimal pressures from the inside is very good for a quarterback in terms of having to just navigate in the pocket. For a lack of better words, Robert Hunt allowed 23 pressures, 3 sacks, played in 16 games. Doesn't mean he started 16 games. Brandon Jones, 1 forced fumble. The safety out of Texas allowed 20 completions on 25 targets, 80% completion, 151 yards, total of 1 touchdown, 105.2 passer rating. Ted Karras, 2 sacks, 11 pressures. That's actually pretty good. Obviously, you really can't track running game stats in terms of an offensive lineman, but it wasn't too great. It was better than the year before, though, and I'm pretty sure at that time Dolphins fans were taking that. He started, I'm pretty sure, all 16 games. Kyle Van Noy, 14 games, 69 tackles, 6 sacks, 10 quarterback hits, 10 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, if I have that correctly, and also 18 pressures. Shaq Lawson, 18 quarterback hits, which was close to his career high if it wasn't his career high. Total of 4 sacks, 25 pressures, 32 tackles total. Played in 14 games, started 7. And then you take a look at the past draft picks, the past undrafted free agents from 2019. Yes, I understand this video is going a bit long, but I want to make sure I cover a lot of bases. And I'll talk about something else before I go to 2021. Then it's probably going to be over from there. So, how did the second-year guys do in their second year? Christian Wilkins regressed a little bit. He played in 14 games, started 12, 1.5 sacks, 10 pressures, total of 47 tackles. So he regressed a little bit. Nick Needham, he gave up 42 completions on 64 targets, 2 interceptions like he had in his rookie year. Gave up more targets. You can see that by the completion percentage. 3 touchdowns, 95.1 passer rating. So that was really down compared to the passer rating that he gave up in his rookie year, which was in the hundreds, and that's not really where you want to be. Michael Dieter, the 3rd-round pick out of Wisconsin, only played 22 offensive snaps. Then Andrew Van Ginkel was better in his second year than he was in his first year, more impactful. Total of 48 tackles, 7 tackles for a loss, 10 quarterback hits, 5.5 sacks, a fumble recovery for a touchdown that was 78 yards, 3 forced fumbles, 4 pass deflections, started 11 of 16 games. And one thing I will talk about as I take a sip real quickly, and then we'll get to 2021, some of the coaching changes, and then final thoughts, is Tua Tagovailoa. Now, we mentioned the stats. We mentioned Ryan Fitzpatrick's stats. Something I didn't like, and I said it at the end of the season with Brian Flores. He wanted to do 2 things at once, and you really can't do 2 things at once. Now, I believe the original reason for Tua coming in was Ryan Fitzpatrick was injured. Then they said, you know what, we're going to stick with Tua. Then, in 2 separate weeks, against the Broncos and against the Raiders, one of them was a loss, one of them actually happened to come out and be a win. We all know the infamous play where the guy grabs Fitzpatrick's face mask and he just throws it up and Mac Hollins makes the play. Well, they benched Tua in those games. Once against the Broncos, if I didn't mention already, once against the Raiders, Week 11 and Week 16. You can't do 2 things at once. And I get it. Premature at the time, the success that they were having. Let's take a look at the record at the time. So let's go to the 2020 schedule. Let's go to the Raiders game, which was Week 16, 10-5. They were competing for the playoffs. Obviously, the Buffalo game knocked them out. But with that being said, they were competing for the playoffs. And here's my thing, here's my philosophy. In that case, and I understand it's a very unpopular take, but stick with the rookie quarterback. There's progress. You're seeing progress with him, and I understand he wasn't the greatest at times, probably fumbling, probably throwing interceptions, doing some stupid shit like rookies do. So it's either let him learn behind Fitzpatrick, or just go out there and throw him into the fire. The offensive line really was better, and I know that has impact, but little impact on what I'm trying to say. But my point is, yes, you were having success. You were competing for the playoffs. It seemed like the process was speeding up, and you guys were going to be a playoff team. But with that being said, nowadays I've taken another approach, and I'm not going to try to hog up the rest of the video with this because I have 2021 to get to. But let me spray an example. The Jets. And it kind of goes back to what the Giants failed at doing this year. They somewhat built through the draft, and they had just spent a lot of money in free agency. Adoree Jackson, Kyle Rudolph, Kenny Galladay. When they saw a 6-10 season, they thought Joe Judge was the coach. Then they started just spending in free agency when they should have taken that time to develop Joe Judge as a coach, let the process go, and let the process just flow out, have it take its course, rather than spend in free agency. Just build on draft picks, because the Giants were doing good on draft picks, at least in 2020, with the guys they drafted. Andrew Thomas was getting better at the end of the season, stuff like that. So why rush the process? My point with the Jets is, and I've had several arguments with my brother over it, he doesn't know if Salah's the guy. And he wants to go spend in free agency. Obviously, fans have no impact on what the Jets actually do, but they have a lot of cap space. Why not let that money roll over, see what Salah does with his coaching staff, see if he does stuff on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe he adjusts, maybe he doesn't. But see another year of developing draft picks, bring in capital, stuff like that. And when you feel Salah is ready, when he's doing enough with the draft picks he has, then you reward him and put the cherry on top with free agency. So that's just my opinion. Obviously, it relates a little bit into the Tua Tagovailoa thing, but don't try to do two things at once. Either win and go for a playoff spot prematurely, or develop your quarterback. That's my point. And they lost, and I'm not saying they tanked, but they did lose a lot of games, and we're in that spot to select Tua Tagovailoa, and they did that. So anyway, with that being said, let's go to the 2021, the final season we'll reflect on, and here is their schedule. Obviously, they started out with a win, unlike the prior two seasons. They went, should say, 9-8, but obviously, let me just see if, hold on. I apologize for the many errors. Give me 1 second. Okay, obviously it's not moving, but obviously you guys can see, yes, they did go 9-8, and they ended up winning their last week against New England, but that did not get them into the playoffs, and then they fired Brian Flores afterwards. So they did make some coaching changes. They fired Chan Gailey. I think he actually resigned. Robbie Brown was fired. Marion Hobby left for the Bengals defensive line job. And then a couple of things happened. Danny Crossman promoted to assistant head coach. Mike Judge was promoted to assistant tight ends coach. Charlie Fry was hired as the quarterbacks coach. Sean Flaherty, wonder if he was related to Pat Flaherty, hired as the assistant offensive line coach. Lemuel Jean-Pierre was promoted to offensive line coach. Charles Burks was hired as the cornerbacks coach. Austin Clark was promoted to defensive line coach. Rob Leonard was moved to outside linebackers coach. Stephen Gregory was hired as a coaching assistant. This one's weird. I've never heard of this one before. I thought it was weird when they announced it. George Godsey and Eric Studesville named as co-offensive coordinators. How does that happen? Who's play calling? It's just a weird title to have, and if this happened with any other team, I would have the same judgment. It's just weird. It's just weird. So they really didn't spend in free agency. They spent through their draft, and honestly, I've talked to some Miami Dolphins fans, and they say, like I say, that this was really their most impactful draft. I feel like they had the most hits in this draft compared to the prior two drafts. So they drafted Jalen Waddle in the first round out of Alabama. going to give a spoiler, had an 1,000-plus yard season. Jalen Phillips, defensive end out of Miami. He had a good season. Javon Holland, safety out of Oregon. He had a good season. Liam Eichenberg, you really can't say the same thing. That's when the Giants actually traded back for Azeez Ojulari, so we gave them the 42nd pick. They selected Liam Eichenberg out of Notre Dame. They also drafted Hunter Long in the 3rd round out of Boston College. Then you go to the 7th round, Larnell Coleman. They selected him out of UMass, offensive tackle. Then Jared Oaks, running back out of Cincinnati. So let's go to the stats if we have nothing else to go over. I just want to make sure that we're getting everything intact. Yes, so let's go to the offensive side of the ball. They were 25th in total yards per game, 17th in passing offense, 30th in rushing offense, 22nd in points per game, so a little regression. 14th in sacks allowed, probably 14th most in sacks allowed, which honestly isn't a good thing. And their offensive line, I think, got better at the latter end of the season, but still not a lot of long-term solutions that you can probably pull out. The one you probably can pull out is Robert Hunt, the one they selected in the 2nd round of the 2020 NFL Draft. With that being said, they were 26th in giveaways, 10th in pass play percentage, 8th in pass play percentage on first down, 23rd in run rate percentage, 28th in run rate percentage on first down. Talk about the defensive side of the ball, then we'll get to player stats. 15th in total yards per game, 16th in passing defense, 14th in rushing defense, 16th in points per game, 17th in turnover differential. Obviously, that fluctuates with the offense because of turning over the football on offense and getting turnovers on defense. They were 9th in turnovers on defense, 2nd in blitz percentage, 3rd in pressure percentage. Very good on that side. 12th most in missed tackles, so that's not very good, but obviously they played well enough on defense, at least in my opinion, to have that overlooked. Maybe not. Maybe Dolphins fans will actually disagree with me. 15th in sacks and 14th in interceptions, so a little bit of a drop-off there in terms of interceptions because they were first, and then they fell to 14th. With that being said, let's talk about the offensive side of the ball. Talk about Jacoby Brissett also because Tua Tagovailoa was injured a little bit, and Brissett came in. So Tua Tagovailoa, I feel like I just butchered his name now, but Tua Tagovailoa, he really didn't make that second step. And I'm not going to say it's all his fault, but he really didn't make that second step that a 5th overall pick really should, at least in my opinion. Maybe I'm being too judgmental, but he threw 16 interceptions, 16 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, had a completion percentage, which is good, of 67.8, 2,653 yards. Then you compare him to Jacoby Brissett. Tagovailoa played in 13 games. Brissett played in 11. Obviously, he probably didn't play in all 11, but he was active for that at least. Completed 62.7% of his passes for 1,283 yards. Total of 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 123 yards per game. So you move to the rushing category, which is an area they were not successful in. Myles Gaskin was the leading rusher, a total of 3 touchdowns on the season, 612 yards on the ground, 3.5 yards per carry. That's not going to get you much. Duke Johnson was their second leading rusher, total of 3 touchdowns for him as well, 4.8 yards per carry, 330 rushing yards on 71 attempts. Salvon Ahmed, 149 rushing yards on 54 attempts. That's about 2.8 yards per carry. That's not really that good. Then Tua Tagovailoa had 3 rushing touchdowns, 1 from Malcolm Brown. Philip Lindsay also got in there, but not too many appearances for him. Then you take a look at the receiving game for the Miami Dolphins. Jalen Waddle over 1,000 yards, a total of 6 touchdowns. Over 100 targets, over 100 receptions, makes sense. Mike Gesicki, once again, the second leading receiver, 2 touchdowns, 780 yards, 10.7 yards per catch. Then Devontae Parker, 515 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, about 40 receptions. Then Durham Smythe followed him, 357 receiving yards on 34 receptions. Gaskin, Matt Collins, Isaiah Ford, and Albert Wilson followed them. You take a look at the leading sacker. Once again, it was Emmanuel Ogbah. I will include Jalen Phillips as well because obviously the draft class, and he was the second leading sacker. So for Ogbah, 39 pressures, 41 total tackles, 9 sacks. Appeared in all 17 games, started 11 of them. Then you take a look at Jalen Phillips, the rookie out of Miami, and there was a lot of concerns with him in terms of injury. But with that being said, I feel like he had a really good rookie season. 8.5 sacks, 26 pressures, 42 total tackles. Started 5 of the 17 games he appeared in, so he was healthy. He was healthy, and that was a big concern for him coming into his rookie year, just overall in career-wise. So the leader in interceptions, Xavier Howard, had a total of 5 interceptions, gave up 49 completions on 93 targets, 52.7 completion percentage, 614 yards given up, 6 touchdowns, 72.6 passer rating, which once again is still low compared to his 2019 stats, which were not great, but also that was in limited appearances. With that being said, impact of the draft picks. Then we'll talk about some stuff at the end and finally end this video. I feel like I'm going for a long time here. I just want to give you guys the best information, the best research possible. The impact of the draft picks, we talked about Jalen Waddle, had a very impactful rookie season. Really was definitely fitting the mold for that category of the top 3 wide receivers. We all know it was Jamar Chase, Devonta Smith, and Jalen Waddle. Obviously, injury issues with Jalen Waddle back at Alabama. He fit the mold. He played in 16 games, started all of them, missed 1 game. That is an impressive draft pick, and let me tell you something. Chris Grier had a couple of hits and misses during his time, and obviously he's still the GM now, but during his time in Miami, he's had some hits, he's had some misses. I feel like this has been the most impactful draft class yet in year 1. With that being said, we went over Jalen Phillips. Talk about Liam Eichenberg. He really didn't have a good season. Second round pick, 9 sacks, 62 pressures, 10 penalties, 4 fumble recoveries in 16 games. That's not great. He played a little bit of left guard. I think he played left tackle a little bit as well. Javon Holland gave up 20 completions on 33 targets, 60.6 completion percentage, 4 touchdowns, give up 109.7 passer rating, 2.5 sacks, 8 pressures, was sent on 51 blitzes. So in the box, I feel he's very dangerous. 2 interceptions, started 13 of the 16 games he appeared in, 3 tackles for a loss, 7 quarterback hits. Tua Tagovailoa, we mentioned him in his second season, his stats already. Austin Jackson, 2 sacks, 62 pressures allowed in 17 games. I don't see any positives there. Noah Ibenogany, the first-round draft pick from 2020 out of Auburn. Didn't really see the field much. Started 1 game, appeared in 7, 6 completions given up on 9 targets, 129.4 passer rating, and a touchdown. Not too positive there. Robert Hunt, 3 pressures in the final 6 games, 2 sacks in 17 games. I couldn't get the pressure numbers, but that's impressive. Solomon Kinley only started 2 games. Raekwon Davis regressed a little bit, but he had half a sack more than he did in his rookie year. Half a sack, 28 tackles, a quarterback hit, a tackle for a loss. So I guess he didn't really see the field. Brandon Jones, the last from 2020, he gave up 27 completions on 33 targets, 81.8 completion percentage, 330 yards, 95.7 passer rating, slightly lower than the year before. 79 total tackles, 1 interception, 13 games started, 15 games appeared in. Then you finally look at the 2019 draft class a little bit, and I'll go into Byron Jones after that, and we'll call it quits there. Christian Wilkins had his best season yet, 4.5 sacks, 17 pressures, 89 total tackles, played all 17 games, started all 17 games. Michael Dieter allowed 1 sack in 8 games. I guess he really didn't play that much, but it wasn't impressive from what I heard either. Andrew Van Ginkel took a little bit of a regression in terms of sacks, but that's not really his main priority as well. 4 sacks on the season, 71 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 20 quarterback hits. That's double from the year prior, so he's making an impact as a mid-round pick. Then we'll talk about Byron Jones, and we'll talk about Brian Flores, my thoughts on him. Byron Jones allowed a 60 completion percentage, gave up 4 touchdowns, 100.6 passer rating, not really that good, 729 yards, started 16 games, appeared in 16 games, 58 total tackles. So, Where do I stand on Brian Flores? You might ask that question. Alex, he's a Brooklyn native. Why wouldn't you want him as the head coach? Here are my thoughts. He did have some success. He did have some success in Miami. There is no doubt about that. He is this close to 500. With that being said, a lot of success on the defensive side of the ball. There's no doubt that defense definitely works under him. His defensive coordinators, his defensive coaching staff gets the most out of the talent that's there. Here's the problem, though. That's not really a problem for the Giants. The offense is the problem. And in Miami, the offense wasn't good. And he didn't get along with the front office. He didn't get along with his coaching staff. And there were way too many coaching staff changes on the offensive side of the ball. 3 coordinators, really 4 in 3 years. I can't really have that. If I'm I'm a fan, but if I'm a owner or a GM, I can't have that in my building, the constant instability. And obviously, once again, coaches, they'll leave for different positions. Head coach in a college, head coach somewhere else. But you can't have that much instability. You cannot have that much instability. And listen, Brian Flores, I believe he should get a job. I think the Texans are a fit personally because he's, in my opinion, a program builder. If you move him to the Texans where Nick Caserio is, you get Patrick Graham over there, maybe Joe Judge as a special teams coach. I think that team with personnel adjustments can be good in the future, but I don't think New York's the fit for him. If he supposedly had anger issues, if he supposedly told Tua that he should have drafted Mac Jones, if he had all other issues, I don't think that would be a very good thing for the New York media, and he'd probably be rushed out in 2 years. With that being said, should that really play into why he shouldn't be the head coach in terms of the media? No, bullshit. But I just really don't like the instability on the offensive side of the ball. And in a year where we really have to see, does the GM believe in Daniel Jones? Does he not believe in Daniel Jones? In a get-right year of one of many years in a rebuild, we have to, as an organization, I know I say we, but the Giants organization has to get it right. They have to. Because we've seen teams across the NFL turn it over in 1, 2, 3 years at most in the modern days. And the Giants fans haven't had the feeling of winning in a long time. So, me personally, I would stay away from Brian Flores. I know that there's not a lot of great coaching candidates out there. But with that being said, Brian Daboll, after the Bills' performance against the Chiefs, he's still my number 1. But honestly, if I'm going to be honest with you guys, I really don't have a number 2. Not many great options. Some could be dark horse, whatever the case may be, but Daboll's my number 1. And the other guys, I'm like, this is really what we have to choose from. With that being said, guys, I apologize for this video being so long. I just want to give you guys the most details as possible. If you guys haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe, turn on post notifications so you know when live stream pops video drops. Hopefully we don't hire a head coach within the next few days. And I'm not saying that, oh, well, we have to slow down the process because we're going through candidates too fast. But I want to get some head coaching videos out there for guys like Dan Quinn, Brian Daboll, Lou Anarumo, former DB coach. So with that being said, guys, peace out, see you later, and stay cool.